Welcome back to the channel, everybody. This is LCOBMW. I'm Glenn McGowan. Today is part 2 of the hydro handbrake install on the C3 Corvette back there, the blue one. So last week we did the install of the handle. I made a custom mount for it and I have that all in place. This week I'm going to focus on plumbing everything, hooking the brake lines up to the master cylinder of the handbrake and splicing them into the car. First things first, we're going to talk about the things you need to actually do double flare on brake lines. Obviously, your first thing, most important thing is double flaring tool. You can get these at any parts store, Amazon.com, pretty much anywhere you can get this. Kind of like a must need to do a nice clean double flare. The other thing you're going to need is some sort of tubing cutter, some form of tubing bender to make some nice clean tubing bends without kinking it. So you're going to need those little things. You're going to need brake line tubing, whether it's like 1/4 inch or 3/16, and then you're going to need fittings as well to, obviously hook these things up to different T's or unions or however you're going to set it up in your car specifically. So I'll show you exactly what I'm going to do. One thing I want to go over too is the master cylinders that you need for hooking a hydro handbrake up to either a separate set of calipers or if you're splicing them inline. So I didn't really know going into this. This is the first one I've ever hooked up. So I bought a hydro handbrake that had this style master cylinder on here that has the fluid reservoir in here. This design is for your own separate system. So if you're adding this and you're adding a secondary set of calipers on the rear, this is the style that you're going to need for that. So just keep that in mind. So when you're even buying a handbrake, if you're just going to be splicing them into the brake lines that are already there and using your existing calipers, this is not going to work for you. So kind of learned that a little bit the hard way, but we're here now, so it's all good. So what you're going to need is a master cylinder like this that has an area that has where the master cylinder would go. So you're essentially going to be running the brake lines through the master cylinder here and then out here. So this is just essentially just an extension of your rear brake line going back to your rear calipers here. So these slave cylinders, they run around like 20 bucks. I've got this on Amazon too. I'll leave all the links in the descriptions. So if you are putting something like this together, this is kind of what you're going to need. These fittings were extra. The fitting on the front of these two, which I thought was kind of important because it was kind of hard finding information. This is a -3 AN fitting in the very front of this. Even if you're using this style master cylinder, the same thing, -3 AN. I went up to a shop around the corner that does all sorts of fittings and all sorts of brake lines. They specialize in that kind of stuff, and they hooked me up with this. I have some 90s coming off of this thing, so when this hooks up to the handbrake, it'll 90 right off to my lines and they'll go right to underneath the car and we'll hook them up in there. So this is what I have set up here, like that. So that's the two differences. So I would say just keep that in mind when you're hooking this up. If you have a second set of calipers, master cylinder, if you're hooking it in line, you need the one that is just a fitting and a fitting. So this is the inlet and then this is the outlet of it. So your brake lines coming from the car itself, you're going to tap in there. There's either going to be 2 of them or 1 of them, and you either T there and run it from there to in here, and then from here, right here, going out, you go back underneath the car and tap into the brake line from the splice back to the rear wheels. So if there's 2 brake lines there or 1, you either got to use a T down there or just 1. In my case, there's already a spot in the lines underneath the car that has 2. Like it was repaired at one point, so there's just like an area where there's a union for 1/4 inch lines that looks essentially like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to undo that and I'm just going to bend those lines out because there's just one solid brake line going to the back of this car. So I'm going to just tap in there, run the line to the master cylinder and then master cylinder back into the other one. So as easy as that sounds, we'll just get into this now. I'm gonna have to drill a couple holes probably in the floor somewhere once I get underneath and figure out where I'm gonna go with the lines. But for right now, that's what we got and let's get started. This week's video is brought to you by LCOBMW.com. Shop our site for Corvette performance parts. We now have our new D.I.Y cat delete pipes back in stock, our new test pipes, and we now have a new version of our hose kit available. This is for 88 to 91. This includes a fitting that you can hook your hose directly up to the hose that's on your car on the firewall. So check out the link in the description or visit @workspace.com. Trying to move this thing over here. Getting pretty tight in here these days. It's only a matter of time before I smash one of the other cars. Should be good. All right, so I got the master cylinder mounted back on the handbrake. I'm going to show you real quick how I'm going to run these lines underneath the car here. All right, so master cylinder's right here. My plan is to do this. Kick these off at 90s and run them straight down and run them right straight down there. So I'm going to show you where I'm going to be tapping down here. So this is where the lines will go up. I already drilled it and put 2 grommets in here. And then I'm going to take this apart right here. And I'm going to just 90 these out here. This one out that way, this one out that way. And then I'm going to run it along here, up and back up into my grommets there. All right, so I'm getting ready to make up these lines, and I wanted to just do a quick little how-to on how to do a double flare if you never did one before. It's one of those things where it's not hard to do, but if you haven't done it before, you want to try to do a couple of these just to get them kind of perfect right out of the gate before you actually make the piece to put on your car or repair the brake line that popped or something like that. The best thing is to get a double flaring tool. Obviously you can't do it without it. They also make like a deburring tool for the edge of the tubing once you cut it. I just have like a little bit of sandpaper, and then I just have like a little kind of like reamer here on my drill, mainly just to clean it up on the inside, but you could do that with sandpaper or something like that. But you want to make sure that the cut is clean and straight, and that there's no like, you know, one end's uneven or anything like that, or there's like, you know, a big buildup of metal from where you cut it. You want to make sure it's a nice clean cut. Super important, or you're going to be doing this like multiple times. So I'm going to start off by cutting a section of this tube off with this tube cutter here, and then I'll show you step by step what you need to do here. So you put your little tube cutter, pipe cutter around here, and you slowly, not a ton of pressure, but just tighten it a little bit, move it around, a little more pressure, and just keep doing that, slowly tightening the handle. Don't crank down on it because you're just going to bend it. So just slowly, as you turn it, you can feel it getting a little looser. Tighten down a little more, keep going. Okay, so here's your piece. Now I'm going to just get some sandpaper. I'm just going to clean up the edge, top, and I'm just going to clean up on the inside here since I have this. Okay, now that it's cleaned up, like that, you probably can't see it, we're going to put it in this piece here, like that. Now, you don't want to stick this up too far or have it down too low. And the trick is you use the die that you're going to use for it. The thickness of that is how much you want sticking up. And that's the reference. There. And snug this down real good. Then you put 3/16 die or whatever size tubing you have in there like that. Make sure it's seated in there flat like that. It's a little there. Then you take this, slide it over. Then now you're going to continue to tighten this down to the little die piece. Goes all the way down and bottoms out on this piece here. And just go slow. And you don't have to like yank down on it as hard as you can. The minute it kind of bottoms out, you can kind of feel it getting tight where it doesn't want to go anymore, then back it off. Because you can actually split the top of the flare if you tighten it down too much on it. I only know that because I did it before. So let me just, so this is step one essentially. That's what that looks like now. And then this is going to push down in there and make it fold it over on itself. So once you take the die out, you just run this all the way down. It essentially bottoms out again. And that is the final product there. You can see that or not. But you want to make sure that it's centered in the tubing, not one end's thicker than the other, because when you put your fitting in there and you tighten it down, it's not going to clamp on the inside of the other fitting. So just make sure if you don't get it right, just cut it off, do another one. Make sure you have a little bit of extra length on your piece, just in case you have to do that, which can't hurt. The other thing too is the most important thing, I probably should have showed this before I did this, always put your fitting on first, then flare it. Because unless you already flared the other side, you're gonna have to cut it off and put that on anyway. So just throw the fitting on, then flare it, just so you know it's on there, unless the other end's not done. But make sure they're on first. If not, doesn't mean anything because you gotta cut it, throw this on anyway. So I'm bending up some brake line right now. Just a couple little quick tips if you never did this before. You can use like your tape measure to get like the lengths or rough estimates of the lengths that you need in the bends to kind of mimic the brake line. If you have extra brake line or like a coat hanger, you can kind of bend this and mock up the shapes that you need. And then you can take this and transfer it over to the actual line that you're gonna use. And this is the piece that I kind of bent up right now. And this is gonna go through the floor like this. There's like a little bend around where the seat is underneath and straight over to where I kicked out the brake line from the frame. So I'm gonna put this up in there like that, get those both mocked up in there. And then I'm gonna just cut, flare, and bend them to the exact fit. So it goes right in the master, nice and clean. And then I'll probably do this to the brake line under the car last, just so that's in place here, all nice and tight and snug. And then I can kind of just cut this to length down and then flare it underneath the car. Now I got these things ran up in here like this. I actually marked them with an O for out, an I for in, because it's very confusing now that they're both just kind of sticking up in the floor here. So that'll be the reference. So I'm gonna just bend these, flare them, just so they're nice and tight up in there like that. Look underneath, bring them back over here. So they'll come down like that. little closer here, and then this is the inlet brake line there, and then this will be the outlet one right there. So I took a piece of line here and I put a 90 in it to get an idea where I need to cut this extra tubing down. So I marked those. I'm gonna cut that right now. Get these things flared first. Actually, before I cut them, fittings, just so you don't forget. So much easier doing this on the bench, not in the car. Time to do some bending. Find my little fitting that fell down here. All right. Make sure you have your fitting above the bender, because if you bend it and the fitting's underneath, you'll never get it over the bend. Should work. One more over here. Make sure it's lined up underneath. Perfect. Okay, so now I'm going to just line these up, thread them in, and then I'll pull all the slack from underneath. The line is easy enough to bend by hand, so you can kind of line up so you get a straight shot with your threads. Okay, so I just finished up underneath. I didn't film any of that. It was kind of ugly at one point. I forgot to put a fitting on one of the lines, so I had to recut it and flare it, but that just happens. So I just want to show you what it looks like real quick. Got it all wrapped up. So this is from the master cylinder up front, runs up underneath the floor here. And then this is the outlet from the handbrake, and that goes to here, which goes to the back of the car. I'm going to just kind of tighten up these lines here, secure them a little bit better, but fairly easy to do. And it helped that there's already a splice in the factory lines too, in kind of the perfect spot. So that worked out well. Okay, so it's brake bleeding time. So if you don't have a fancy pants brake bleeding tool and you have no friends, you can use the option of using a water bottle and a long piece of vacuum hose. So you fill the system up, and essentially you're gonna be hooking this up to your bleeder, and you're gonna do the furthest wheel away from the master cylinder, which is passenger rear first. So you're gonna hook this up to your bleeder screw. You're gonna fill this up with brake fluid, and you're gonna make sure the hose is all the way down into the brake fluid. So the theory is as you're pumping the brake pedal, you're pushing the fluid and the air out, and the hose being in the brake fluid is just sucking up more brake fluid and not sucking back up air into the system as you let off the brake. So you're essentially pumping all the air out into this bottle, so the fluid stays in the bottle and the air escapes out of the fluid in theory. So you can hook this up, it takes no time, and you can just kind of pump all the fluid through the system, get the air bubbles out, and then be good to go. So I'm gonna hook this up and do this right now. All right, so all done, pretty much ready to hit the road. My plan was to go take this out and take it for a test drive, but it is January here in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and this is what I'm dealing with outside. So I don't think I'm gonna be going for a test drive today. So the minute I get some nice weather, I'm going to take this thing out and we're gonna go slide it around the driveway here. So if you enjoyed the video, hit that like button. Thanks for watching.